Good morning, everyone. Thank you for a great turnout today for today's virtual Thursday. This being our 68th one, we're glad to bring to you documenting fire investigations today. My name is Mark Yaden. I'm one of the regional trainers. I represent the Pacific Northwest region up here for emergency reporting. And I'll tell you a little bit more about my history here just in a second. What I'd like to do first was just talk about today will be going over understanding the NFIRS arson module, and in particular the tabs that are part of the incident reporting module. I'd like to share some tips for documenting fire investigation within the incidents module. I think it's a pretty underutilized feature from my experience as a fire marshal and going through it, at least as how I utilized it, and others that we can take advantage of the program in a lot greater way to tell our stats and our story to our governing bodies and to our chiefs, and offer some examples of how to track fire investigation activities that go right back into that very concept. And I retired last October as the Deputy Chief and Fire Marshal in Kennewick, Washington after 40 years fire service experience, and I've been an emergency reporting customer since 2006 is when our agency went to it, and a trainer with emergency reporting shortly after retirement in 2015. And I'd like to take this opportunity as well with me today, staff that are in our home office headquarters in Bellingham, Washington, Sarah, Nicole, and Sydney that are with us today to help answer your chat questions. And I've got a second presenter that's with me, Tommy Batson, regional trainer out of Pender County, North Carolina, 17 years in the fire service, and he's been a great mentor to me, learning this program more, and I thank him today to be on. He's going to be a panelist in the chat section that can help out with your questions. Due to the number of folks that we have online today, which is great, he'll be helping with that. Anything that we don't have time to get to just due to the volume of questions possibly, I'll be happy to follow up in a real timely manner with email where we can get back and make sure everybody's questions get answered. So thank you, Tommy and staff, for being on with me today. I think this is going to be a great session. I'd like to take a minute to talk about on-site or regional training conferences or on-site training or online. ER offers several ways for agencies to achieve in-depth training on the system, and it comes in several forms. One is regional training conferences that I'll detail in the next slide, just components of an RTC, what you'll get out of that. Or we also offer on-site or online training, which are designed to meet your specific needs and enhance your capabilities and use of the program. Our upcoming regional training conferences, we have one coming on in Cincinnati, Ohio, June 2nd through 4th. In Charlotte, North Carolina, November 3rd through 5th. And Monterey, California, December 7th through 9th. So all of those are open for registration right now. You can go to the eventbrite.com website, look those up under those cities and find those there and get a more in-depth what the subject matter is. The regional training conferences, what we call the emergency reporting experience, or the essentials integration and the lead ER. Essentials focuses on in-depth explanation, setup, and best practices of all system modules. It's a comprehensive description of the key features in each module and how they relate to each other are discussed at length. And integration training is driven exclusively by the needs of our students. This session is focused on resolving the specific challenges faced by your department so that you can realize the full potential of emergency reporting. And lead ER training covers topics related to system administration, analytics, and reports. And students are also introduced to Google Maps integration and our vision risk assessment tools. And as mentioned, we have our upcoming regional training conferences. I sure encourage you to go to eventbrite.com and check those out and register. They're very popular and a great way for us to come out and meet you and have FaceTime with departments personnel that are out there, and it's always a great opportunity. I'd like to welcome 30 new or upgraded customers since our last virtual Thursday on April 2nd, and I'm sure that there's even more to that number every day. We're seeing new customers, upgraded customers taking advantage of system features as they learn it more and want to take advantage of those upgrades. So if any of you are from those departments that have upgraded or come online in the last 2 weeks, I welcome you and thanks for being with us here today. And just a reminder where you find the latest information, regularly check out system alerts, this section, and the support tab when you log into ER to see announcements about new products, helpful information, and training such as today's virtual Thursdays. And this is a website, feedback.emergencyreporting.com, that we use to really hear what you want out of the system. I assure you the ER staff looks at this every day, what our customers want out of the system, to hear your ideas. That's what really improves our program and drives what we look for every day, and how do we make this better? It needs to meet your needs. As much as we'd like to be in physical connection with our emergency reporting family, it's just not practical with nearly 3,000 ER agencies to include military bases across the world. So I encourage you to take advantage of the multiple platforms for training by visiting the feedback.com website. There you can access the knowledge base articles, recordings of past virtual Thursdays that are posted there. If you missed today, this will be posted, and any other ones that we've done. I know we've got at least 2 years worth up there. Those sessions, and view and vote on user-suggested new features, and by utilizing the system help pages in order to get the most out of your ER experience. I assure you, in just learning more about this system as a trainer, I've been relying on the help pages that's on every page when you're logged into emergency reporting, and there's almost all times it's just got information that's very helpful that I can answer my questions. So it's kind of my default now. If I've got a question about the program, I make sure I go to the help button first, and it's been a great experience. So today's objectives, students will learn the MFIRS module. We're going to talk about those 5 arson tabs, what they are. You may have, likely all of you have probably seen them before, but let's discuss them a little bit in length. And I'd like to offer some tips for documenting fire investigation within the incidents module. They're things that have worked for me in the past and being successful, all the way from the fire scene to the courtroom within emergency reporting. It's just, I encourage you to really take advantage of it with as much data into as you can. And I would like to share examples of 2 systems report, number 1083 and 1649. We're going to talk about those for tracking fire investigation activities, and offer that in the spirit of when I was deputy chief, trying to offer up to my chief and to our city council just what is it that we do out there. Again, telling our story and being able to, for accountability as well as building our programs and budget purposes, how do we utilize the system to be able to get that type of information out. So there's more reports than these 2, but for the sake of time, we'll highlight those 2 today. And again, thank you for joining us. Please feel free in the chat section if there's anything that you would like covered in a little more depth or ask a question on. Please do that. We'll address that throughout the hour. Tommy will be on there helping with that, as well as Sarah, Nicole, and Sydney with that. So having said that, let's get started. I would like to say this is my very first virtual Thursday, so thank you in advance for, I know that for your patience. I know the subject matter well, but in the spirit of teaching an old dog new tricks, navigating through the screen, so we'll get through that, and if I've got a little snag on anything, just, oops, as if with this right here. Okay, there we go. And I want to make sure that everybody can see. I'm going to enlarge my screen a little bit. And for today, I'm in a test account. In fact, it just has one incident in it because I wanted to focus on today's subject matter. And I created an incident. Again, I'm going to go from the concept most of you have probably been in here doing many incidents, but I created one that's kind of a common one that we see often all jurisdictions around the country. This was a fictitious 12-year-old boy that went in the backyard of a house, set a fire and been leaf pile. So, well, it is an arson, but involves a young juvenile. So we'll go into this report and kind of talk about how that arson tab works. I'm going to jump right into the, so it is populated. You'll see data in here. Again, this is not a real incident, but it kind of all starts out with the arson tab on the basic 2 tab. This is where you'll get in and talk about or check the boxes you want for recording information about people involved and all of the different items that it gives you the opportunity here. What causes this arson tab to pop up is under cause of ignition. With this, anytime you hit intentional, or select I should say, intentional cause under investigation or cause undetermined after investigation, those 3 are going to pull up the arson tab. In fact, if I go back and hit unintentional on this, I'm going to save this, and you'll see those arson tabs will go away. They won't be shown. I learned something on this in preparing for this, so I'll probably embarrass myself a little bit here, but if I was doing it, I'm assuming there's others out there that may have been. Anytime I was going to add anybody onto an incident report, I would just hit the wish to go, or I wish to record information about people involved, where if it's a juvenile under the age of 18, I didn't pay much attention to this because I knew I could put their date of birth in that other. But what I wasn't realizing is this actually opens up the 5th tab of the arson profile, which it wasn't until recently I had never even seen that 5th tab because I'd been going in under just the record information about people. So in fact, you'll see if I select this one and go to that, save it again, now I'm going to bring it back up just with, I'm going to select this as an intentional. I'll go back to that, save it. That'll give me my 4 tabs. That's what I was used to in the past, always seeing. If I say I have somebody that's under 18 that I wish to record information about, I'm also going to select record information about people involved because I have my witnesses and homeowners and everybody I want to add in there. When I save this again, you'll see a 5th tab will come up on the arson tab right there. That's going to be strictly related to the juvenile. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I want to share that as a tip today. Make sure if you've got a juvenile, you're hitting that one, that will bring up, again, even if it's under investigation or undetermined after investigation, we'll keep that highlighted. Another thing that I've learned about it is even though that tab is going away, it's kept all my data that I had in there. But if later on that this fire should be determined to be accidental and you come back and select unintentional, those arson tabs will go away. It doesn't take the data away, but if that tab goes away, you will not see anything that was under there. So just something to be aware of. And just in completing this, and I also wanted to show where populating the address on incidents under the Basic Info 3 tab. Here, if you, in this test account, I don't have any occupancies in there, but say when I'm filling this address out, if this was say an apartment complex or a business where we would have in our system in the occupancy tab, I could populate that address. It'll take me right to the occupancy grid and allow me to select anything we'd have in the system. This was a single family residence, so wasn't applicable there. And I wanted to go then to the basic tab 5 as well before we get into these actual arson tabs. Later on we're going to talk about reports and how we pull information out what is significant on this one to me, and I think as investigators, we really have not been getting in there a lot and filling out what we've done on the scene. Typically on most fire reports, you're going to see extinguished by fire service personnel, maybe you'll see salvage and overhaul, maybe a third code related on what they had done. I typically, as a fire marshal, would always get in there and at least made sure one of these lines had investigate on it for anything that we're doing. And keep this in mind as one of the reports that I'm going to show today will actually, both of them may, but I believe it's just one of them pulls from this action taken, and it will pull from all three tabs. So that's a helpful way as a manager to show it for accounting for the incident that it was investigated and we were out there on it. But pretty underutilized, I think. A lot of times we have a full scene we're investigating. We're not out there documenting that, or at least in ER in the form of something we can pull out and get some stats on. So let's jump to our basic Arson 1 tab. And that first tab is just going to be, first thing is agencies referred to. As you'll see, the red in our system, anything in red is actually required by NFIRS, so you won't be able to close the report and review it until all the red fields are filled out. In all of these arson tabs, that street highway is the only NFIRS required field. I did some research ahead of this on that as to why they require that one field. And from what I've been able to find so far, there's nothing in the documentation other than saying it is a requirement for NFIRS. But a lot of great information here, though, that can be used for tracking purposes or pulling out of the system, so we can see who we're interacting with, and as well as documentation for, again, if you're to go into court where it shows who was involved in the incident or who we referred it to. And so all these fields are just basically to those particular agencies. If this one, in our case here, hadn't been referred, I would just check that box and I could keep moving on. But I listed the police agency. It's typically going to be your local police or sheriff's department you're working with. Some of the fields down here, this actually gets into their uniform crime reporting on the federal level, the FDIC or the ORI numbers. That's what a local law enforcement agency utilizes as they tie into their, probably not significant for us to pull out for fire department tracking, but if you get those numbers from your local law enforcement agencies, again, it's something that we could pull out in the form of a report and see where they're going. Most law enforcement agencies that are not going to have an FDID or have that be applicable. And it gives you three options for motive. For this one here, again, was just a simple, was a juvenile. I coded this as fire play or curiosity, since the scenario was a juvenile in the backyard setting leaves on fire that were up against the house. And I could go down, do other motivating factors. Again, in a report, it would be interesting over time to show exactly what the motivating factors are, the common ones in our area. I know a lot with me when I was making presentations to different groups and things like that. I shared a lot of state information, a lot of federal stats. But as you know, when you're in front of local groups, they want to know what your local problem is, what the fires are, where they're occurring, why they're occurring, and if we're completing this, we're able to pull that out and start answering that question, not only state, federal, but locally, and have us use that as a benchmark as to where we're at. And under group involvement below, you can pick up to 3 of these different categories that go into here. Most of the time it's going to be no group involvement, certainly with the juvenile like what we have here today. If I select either other group or unknown, that's not going to allow me to do any of the either one of those makes it to where you can't select multiple ones, but other than that you can select up to 3 with that. And the Arson tab 2 gets into our incendiary devices and more investigative information. Discussing the availability of material first ignited. In this case, again, we have available at scene where The leaves are what we're talking about, no container involved, but if something like that had been used, and our fuel, ignitable solid with our leaves, and open flame source with a lighter that a witness had seen him pull out of his pocket. And our entry method, as far as in this case, we've gone through a gate that was unlocked to get into a backyard, but it gives really good structure information that if you're completing this, especially on a tablet or anything out in the field, to be able to document that, what that structure was like, the different features here that you could be filling out, that sometimes it's pretty hard to recall that when you're back in the office doing your report, where it's nice to be able to field reporting, be able to call up some of these fields, start getting them filled out. Arson tab 3 really gets into case status, but it also gets back into some structure things. Our first pull down menu is going to get into kind of the status where it's at there. This again will be updated typically later on as a case goes into the investigative mode, and then days or weeks or months later may be closed after arrest or exceptional clearance, whatever that may be. So that's an updating of that. Here you can have multiple picks with initial observations of the structure. Here we're going to assume an empty house that was sitting there for sale. So under the other investigative information, I've also selected a structure was for sale and it was vacant. The doors were locked. And then here, anytime you send any evidence off that might be examined by state, federal, or your local crime lab or private lab that may be looking at some of your materials, able to track that. It doesn't give, you can't put any more detail in than that went to these places as far as their addresses or anything like that, but helpful tracking information. Under the Arson 4 tab, this is where it gives it's a free text field that gives you the opportunity to put some remarks in here. Generally, where I've used this tab in the past, or the text box, would be to put some just basic information in there that may have comments, like my first paragraph there. Typically, anything I put in here, we're going to talk about narrative in a bit. I'll generally make a copy of it and also have it in my narrative, and that was for the purpose of, again, remember some good information here that may go away if it turns out to be an accidental fire. You still want to track what you had in here to show your initial investigation, but if that arson tab goes away due to a recoding on it, you wouldn't see this. So I generally made a point of backing this up in my incident narrative with just a cut and paste on there. And I always like to have in, if I referred anything to the police department or other law enforcement agency, that I had their case number in there, and it also, if it got referred to anybody else, even though we're able to say that there was a referral as part of the arson tabs, I would put in there, like this one with Child Protective Services. So it's not a large narrative field, so typically it's more just like it says here, remarks about it, as opposed to a full-on report. Here is that arson tab 5 that opened up with telling it back in our wish to record information about someone under the age of 18. Opens up a pretty good field. Now, I guess I'll offer the caveat on this that the juvenile information is the one thing that I've come across the most, where you can be pretty sensitive based on your legal department, your local law enforcement, making some decisions as to how much about juveniles you track in their system. So these arson tabs do open up that dialogue that I recommend you have with your local police department, as well as your city attorneys or whoever your legal is on that, as to how much of that gets disclosed when you release a report. State law is going to dictate most of that, where you want to make sure that when they come into the fire station and they get a fire report, that appropriate things are redacted out of there, or it may be the decision on a local level that some of the stuff you're not going to have in your fire report. But it is here. I encourage you to use it, but after you show some of this information to your legal to be able to make sure that it's okay for you to track it. I know I had in an earlier jurisdiction I worked at, our local prosecutor's office for the juveniles. I wanted to have a meeting over concern of what our records were, what we were keeping, what we were releasing, anything related to juveniles, and it worked out well. In fact, they became a full partner in a juvenile academy geared towards teenagers who got arrested and convicted of criminal fire setting. When they saw, we showed them these very types of things, they were very impressed with it, but we did have a good understanding as to what we would or would not release in a records request. So all of these give you some, where you're able to track, again, exactly who's out there, the family type, what it is. In this particular case, we assume we had a history of fire setting with this particular juvenile, and that it was referred to another authority. And I checked that based on law enforcement contacting Child Protective Services, so we did have that. Good information to have on that. Again, I encourage that dialogue with law enforcement and your legal just on these tabs, and that's up to a local decision then as to exactly what you'll track. And obviously this is tracked, but typically that's kind of that balancing act of what's a police report, what's a fire report. You'll have that dialogue in a lot of communities. I've been very fortunate again here with Kennewick to work for a jurisdiction that looked at it. Well, it's both. These fire scenes are investigated, and so there's information that's going to be in both categories, but there is that very definite line once it goes to the law enforcement side of things, of some things that we can't track just because of the logistics and emergency reporting isn't intended to go in to be a law enforcement type database. But do have those kind of conversations. It's great for tracking activities that you do. Once we've gone through the narrative tabs, the arson tabs, it gets into the people category, and I offer this just because that's where when we said we wanted to record information about somebody that was under 18, that's going to be the bottom here. But I also encourage, I think what's underutilized, especially by firefighters that are filling out these incident reports, is to really put in the involvement category. And sometimes, typically, if I was to get into a fire report, I generally might see who the homeowner was or a tenant, and it was pretty much left there. I like to go in and go ahead and name the officers that were on the scene that helped me, the witnesses, and identify them as, witness number one, a neighbor, the police officer that made the arrest, or the insurance adjuster. It really helps you and others that come get the report that have questions. If it's an insurance company that gets it, it lets them know who the different people are that they have to follow up on that, as well as I've seen this utilized by our prosecutors here, where a lot of the law enforcement reports might be one or two 3-ring binders of information, where a fire report's a little more streamlined, and they can look at this and it really gives you a good chronological order of people that can be used. It helps you in court later as you're trying to recall people you've talked to and the roles that they played. So under your contacts, don't hesitate to, under the involvement, which is I believe the first or second text field that you can fill out, a free text field. Just encourage you to do that. It's come up handy for me significant times. And moving on to our narrative, generally you're going to have, this is our narrative field. You open that up, any firefighter that puts a comment in, or our fire officer that put their comments in, this can get pretty busy in here, but what I typically would do is our origin and cause report would be created like outside of the program in Microsoft Word, although on a fire like this, generally my narrative would have been in here, but it's more of a kind of a summary on that case, because under the file section we'll talk about where they can be saved, an actual document saved to there that would be more. But I would have my comments in here. I generally would do it just like you see it here, Fire Marshal's comments, number 1, 2, 3, or supplemental information, however you want to word it. In the incident narrative, this was always helpful for anybody that's reading it to see kind of the flow of what the Fire Marshal's office was involved with from an investigation perspective with police numbers, or also I would list, if we took additional photos under our file section, we can save photos for fire investigations, but typically where you may have 50 to 300 photos, sometimes even more, of a fire scene, under the files I would save 2 or 3 that I felt best represented things, but I would list in here where even that somebody could go find it. As your records people are pulling up fire reports, they can look at that and see that where they go to get that there are more photos than we have in here, and that's the type of thing that I would put in the narrative. So I encourage you to do that, to get in, even though you may have firefighters' comments in there. Make it clear where what the fire marshal or fire investigator or inspector comments are, and have that in the narrative section. And again, at the bottom here, you also have on narratives other agencies that were on scene, to be able to, to have that. I've got law checked here that gives you the ability to look that up later and document who was there with you. Under the file section, this is where, again, I wouldn't try to save all the photos. You can put as many photos in here that you would like. When it says that, when you go into the system, you can download up to 20 at one time. I found a lot of times I would put in that many photos, but I wouldn't do them all at once. I'd select about 5 at a time and put in there just the speed of them going in. But it's great to have, again, representative photos that I would have like this that would kind of tell the basic story, but my photos would be in here. This, as well as where attaching your an origin and cause report that'll come into the file section that you can save under this tab, that would be a Word document or a PDF. Have it in there. Any other information on the property that can be loaded in this section as well. Property ownership, like with your county records with that, and just information insurance company supplies you. It's unlimited as to what you can have here. If it's in electronic format, especially PDF, it just goes in nice, and it's great to have that, because when you're out in the field doing further investigation, I try to get these things loaded up front, because that helped out fire investigators a lot. If you're out there and you're on your MDT or a tablet or anything like that, to be able to call this back up out in the scene and look at a lot of this information. So generally for me, I would be working a fire, and the first few hours of it just spent getting in the report, putting as much information as I could. Even on the scene, I would be trying to get that, collecting everything that I could. So how about, let's go back out. I haven't really been following the chat here to see if we've got any questions or anything like that. I feel like I'm kind of going through this a little bit fast to allow for that, but hopefully Tommy will pick up and the staff any questions that anybody might have. So don't hesitate in the chat box to ask any questions, and if we can explain something a little bit in further detail.
Mark, the only real big question we had was a gentleman requested as a juvenile fire investigator to interview and conduct interviews outside of his area, and the biggest thing is, how do you document that? Myself, as well as many other investigators, when we respond or assist another agency, we just do a report for our agency and document that in there with the lead investigator, what was done, and their report and their information in our report. That way it's documented in our system, or whatever your policy or procedures for your agency is.
Exactly, and that's a good point, Tommy. Thank you, and thank you for that question, because that is an excellent question. Often you'll get called to go out on an investigative task force where you're out of your jurisdiction. You may be counties away or across the state or anywhere. I still would utilize our, complete an incident report from our jurisdiction and have all of that information attached to it, that then would just be a copy of that provided to that local agency. But you're right, that's exactly how I would have done that as well, documenting that interview, generally with juveniles, of course. In most of the cases, you're going to have somebody with you to where you're going to have a witness to the interview and have that. But just, yeah, good documentation, can't stress that enough. And actually attach it in here. So it's all here. A typical fire investigation report that we would have here in Kennewick might have 10, maybe even more documents attached under the file section, and it would be any of those interviews. A lot of times I would actually take the police report and scan it and put it in here as well. So anybody calling up a fire report would have that information available to them.
Mark, we have
yes.
one more question. Are there any plans for a fire investigation tab? There has been a feature request put in to the user voice. It is taking votes, and if anybody's interested, go in there and vote for it. And we'll continue to vote for it, but right now it's not a large priority and there's not a large want for it. But just go in and use your votes in the user voice and voice your opinion and vote for it, and we'll see where it goes.
Right, and good question, and again, thanks, Tommy. We get asked that a fair amount lately. More and more county fire marshal's office are going on to emergency reporting, as well as other jurisdictions that are fire marshal's offices that are wanting to go into this more, and there hasn't been a big demand for it so far. And just coming out of the fire service, I think that's because, again, we haven't utilized it to that extent. We typically investigate, and then we're doing our things outside in a word processing or whatever, and keeping our files in a hard file in a drawer somewhere, and calling them up and when we need them. So I really encourage a lot more electronic tracking of this. I think that'll grow the need, and the best way to do that is for the industry, you guys that are using that out there, to be able to get in under user features and tell a user story of what do you need as a fire investigator, as a fire marshal, pulling out information from reports to the actual tabs that are in there. So I've heard discussion on that. I promise you, internally we're talking about it a lot. Both Tommy and I are advocates for, let's increase the use of this more, but I really think it stems from it's pretty underutilized on there. So as there's more demand for it, I think that's going to grow. And we do have a question or comment related to showing the print page that has the arson file. And Sarah, if I could just ask for a little bit of clarification on there, would that be the print page like for the basic incident report? And we'll come back to that just in a little bit. It's a good idea as far as printing the incident out and having that on there. And Tommy, maybe you could help with that a little bit as well too, if you could help me out with exactly. I know we'll go back to when we're printing this out after we close out of this. So how about if I come back, I'm going to write that down so I remember to come out to bring that up. We'll go through reports, and we'll come back and show how to print this up as well. Thank you, Sarah. So we've got through that. If we go back to now, let's switch hats a little bit and say we're trying to show what our stats are, or where we'd go to pull out what we've done, what's been closed. I'd like to put on a hat of a fire marshal here as you're pulling out your division, trying to track it to see the activity in the reports module. What I'd actually do, and I would really like to send out a big thank you to Harris County Fire Marshal's office in Harris County, Texas, which is the greater Houston area. They've allowed us today to log on to their site to show the reports they've done, and this is we're logged into their account right now. They made a custom report, and this is a great example of what I was talking about, of a need of what they've done to pull out their stats, and they offered suggestions for a report and actually paid for that, and now we've got report 1649 that's in the system, and I'll show you up here, we could type in 1649 and find it. For this first one, you'd get in and finding that report, going to incident, and you could look through the general for fire, the incident details. There are other reports in here related to activities and things that you can break down. But for this one, let's go to that 1649 under the general tab, and it's called compiled arson. Now you'll see I like the report, so I added it to my favorites, and that's why you don't see a to add to favorites tab. We'll actually find it up here as well. So let's go to that in my favorites. So I encourage you to do that as well. As you get into the system and find these reports that work for you, put them up into your favorites. That way you're not having to go in and find it each time. Where it's at in the system, you can quickly get them and pull them up. But this compiled arson pulls from those arson tab fields. It also pulls from custom questions, and I think we're going to have time here to go over that I wanted to show you custom field questions related to fire investigation. You'll see that's under the custom tab. It's actually called user-defined questions in our system, where you go in to create them, and look at all of the ones that Harris County has created where they fill out. Now they're kind of unique as far as it's a fire marshal's office, so they don't have EMS reports. They do have active suppression responsibilities with hazmat response for their county. So these custom questions are going to come up on every incident that comes up. So in your jurisdiction, if you're have custom questions related to incident reporting or EMS calls, anything like that, those are at the bottom of the report that they have to go through. So it'll show up on everyone. But we'll look at that as how you create them and what they look like. But they've just done a lot on specific information from arrest, a canine deployment. They've got a canine in there with them, so they wanted all of these stats out of there. So it'll pull from the arson tabs plus these. We're going to leave it on all custom questions, and we're just going to go for the first quarter of this year to look at what they've done there. And I'm going to make this a little larger. Hopefully you're able to see it. Actually, I've got to go down because it highlights the main ER screen. Let's see if we can bring the other screen up. There we go. Hopefully you'll be able to see that. And you can see in their report here, their cause of ignition. It'll bring that over where you can see their stats there, the stations that they have of their 195 calls in that quarter where they've come out of. It does get into tells you each incident that has a custom field answered on it. So this is a good example where you can go up here and take this out to Excel if you wanted to be able to weed some of it out and come down to the basic fields that you want. But as you get down through here listing that out, then it does get into their case status as far as adult arrest, citations, juvenile arrest, starts giving their number that they've had there. These are related to hazmat, but then it'll get down again. Was the canine deployed on that? 87 times no, 19 times yes. So they've got a host of different information, juvenile arrests, adult arrests that they have there that would be great for pulling out and having that to be able to present, telling their stories, as well as they also pulled over, the report pulls over civilian casualties, property use, so fire service civilian casualties on these related incidents. So this could be taken out to an Excel document and really cleaned up, and but taking out some of these fields that their referrals that they've got down here. So this is very handy for like juvenile fire setter program, where they're referred to law enforcement, other agencies. So I really give them a lot of credit for their forethought and thinking about this thing, tracking their stats down there, and the information that comes out of it. And that again was report 1649. Let me take this field back up a little bit so we can. The other one was report 1083. Now again, if I know the number of that, I can either go back into my favorites since I've got it in there, or I can just type in. And sorry, I've got my screen enlarged enough now that it cuts off a lot of it. But say 1083, let's look at that one again. 1083 now is going to pull those 3 categories where we were back there with actions taken, like the investigate, provide media, or you know, and it's going to pull for all fields. So whether they're putting suppression in there or anything, let's look at that one as well on 1083 for the first quarter of 2015 in Harris County and see what we get. See if I can enlarge that. So it gives you a great example of what they can use now. You know, 53% they, you know, investigated, investigate fire out on arrival. It's going to give you all these different categories of your activities, but anything, you know, information, investigation, enforcement, 10% for that. So you can really start showing your fire prevention division, your investigators, based on these activities for all actions taken. But you're only going to pull them out if you're going in the reports and actually putting that in. But I thought this would be, from a manager's perspective, a very helpful report to show what is it that we're doing out in the field as a division, and being able to have that. And I'm going to go, actually right now, let's go back into the other report that we had. So the custom fields, if you were interested in doing some of that for fire investigation, this is where it's done under the administration module. Now, unless you're an administrator in your program, you're not going to see that tab if you're not allowed permission to get in there. But go to your system administrator and ask them, do you have the possibility of putting in some fire prevention questions that would be in there? And as you go in there, it's here under user-defined fields. And I put a couple of questions in there under that report. Here's a couple that I created that I thought, well, what would be handy to know? You know, did a certified fire investigator determine the fire's origin and cause, or was the fire investigation team deployed? So these are the different answers to those that they put in there if it's not applicable, and we'll go back into the incident report and I'll show what this looks like on that. Or, you know, one was, yeah, we needed one but not available at the time of an incident. They can be simple yes/no questions to have that, and you can have, you know, a list of them that's here. And that's just what Harris County did on their, sorry, my screen's going to be awful small, I'll enlarge it. As you look at their user-defined fields, I'm going to take this up, I apologize for the tiny screen. You can put the sequence as to how they want them in there. These questions are on their incident reports with their answers that they have on all their reports. But again, with the fire marshal's office, it's not like they've got a bunch of other type of reports, EMS or other type of reports in there that they can have. So they're able to pull out who their jurisdictions they're working with and things that they think are specific of information they want to have. So let's go back into, sorry, hopefully I'm not making you car sick jumping around here. We're going to go back into the one incident that I created, and this is the field where it comes up, that custom tab. And there's the two questions that I asked. Now you notice one is black and one is red. As you create that custom field, you're able to say, is that going to be a required field? Anything that's in red, they would have to answer before they could close out and review that report. If it's in black, then it's optional if they want to do it, but that is on the bottom of every fire report. This is my custom fields page. I'm actually in that report. But if I'm filling out this report on a fire, if I'm on an EMS call or anything else, I can just put not applicable and move on and finish my report, or it gives me the ability to track that. So very helpful information on that you might be able to create. with a lot of these, or all the modules, well, you know, a good recommendation is when you set them up, think about what information is that you want to track, that you want to be able to pull out of that incident and track, because that's going to help you with your initial setup, whether it's your custom fields or you're in the occupancy module, a lot of things that may be related to fire investigation or code enforcement, that type of thing, those pull-down menus, the settings that you want to have. Always go into it, and even in an existing account, look at it and say, are we really asking the questions and putting into these fields what we need to be able to get that information back out in the form of a report. So as let's go back in the main incidents, view there with that. I'm going to take my screen down just a little bit so I can see the tabs in here. Sorry, I probably made that too small for you. And what I'm wanting to do is get back into the print section. I should have done this when I was in there. So when we're ready to print this report out, when you hit the print tab, it actually prints to screen what you have on there. It doesn't send it to the printer yet. Again, a lot of times out in the field, you may want to look at this without actually opening up the incident report, or you can put, well, I'm just going to put check all and print. That where it's going to bring up that incident report with the information that you've put in it under our fire, with all the things that we've done in structure fire. And now here's where that arson tab would come up. Thank you for reminding me about this, Sarah. The information on the arson tab, that's how it's going to show. And so from being able to use it, again, you can see your prosecutor reading this, or law enforcement that you referred this case to, now that maybe they're the ones that are going to do the follow-up on this juvenile. They've got a good accounting of that structure, what happened at the time, your remarks that you put underneath there, and it just makes it nice for them to see with that, and that'll grow with, you know, the amount of information you put in there. It does come up, even though that was a small text box, it looks like a normal size text field here. Here's all of your people that were involved. It's helpful again to talk about whether they were the witness, the landlord, police officer. I've got a case that I've got to still go back that is 4 years into it, that we're an arson case here in Kennewick where I'm going to testify next month, and I put down the first officer I talked to. There was 2 officers on the scene. I didn't write the second one down, so for the life of me I can't remember it. It's been a little bit embarrassing. I don't even remember who I worked with on it, and I sure wish I had documented it here. I got 1 officer in but not the other, so don't hesitate to, those officers you're putting in, get them in there, insurance agents. It does make the report a little longer, but when you get to this point and need that information, it's very helpful to have. And I've found that jurors appreciate detailed reports and good information, and always my emergency reporting report that I printed out, they were very impressed with it, especially with the photos, different things that are in it that really add to that, our incident images, custom fields, everything that we had in there. It is a very professional report with a lot of great detail, and it's all, you know, it answers our in-first questions as well as much as we have in here. It can also be used in other areas in our judicial system. So, boy, we're coming right up on the last few minutes of this. I would ask Tommy or Sarah if there's any other questions that we could spend a few minutes. Be happy to get into custom, you know, fields again, doing one of those if I needed a little more explanation in that. But is there anything on our chat side that topics we could go over?
Mark, one of the biggest questions is what prints, and only what prints is everything except for what you click on when you were in the print. When you were in the print right before you printed, Mark.
Right.
That was the big thing. And there's some, I guess there is some discussion of being able to select that arson tab. Do you want it or you not want it after today's? We'll bring that to the attention of development and see where it goes. But I mean, that is a need that has arisen that we see.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I guess some of us never look at it that way, and then a lot of us do, that are joint departments where you want to release public information but not our investigative side.
Right,
So that's probably the
exactly.
biggest thing that's come to light today, and we appreciate everybody's participation and questions.
You bet. And there's to comment on that too, Tommy. Thanks for the question. That's excellent. A lot of times what I would do on this, our local policy was if there was things in here on the investigative side of it that made this report to where it couldn't be released because of law enforcement purposes, and in Washington State, that's up until the time they actually make a charging decision that isn't up for public disclosure yet. So our actual fire report would be withheld until that time that decision was made on the serious arson cases, or we'd select to where we would just give them the information based on the basic incident report. Washington State requires that if you've got information and fields and other things like that, unless it falls under that law enforcement exception, you have to give them the report with that information redacted out. But you can't, with our state law, you can't hold information back, and you have to tell them what you're holding back and the reason why our state law as to what's being redacted with the list on that. So our local policy was made to where we would print this all out, but it would have to be gone over by the public records clerk helping us redact anything out that would be, the 12-year-old male or names or things like that wouldn't be up for public disclosure would be blacked out, but it would show the narrative section and anything, everything in there that we could see what we've done. So, but again, that's what we've talked about today. That would really be on a local level, good coordination with your law enforcement agency on that will answer those questions as to how you handle that, how much gets put in the system, but you can sure see it's emergency reporting. This module's just got an incredible amount of useful information that can go into it and be pulled out in the form of reports. And I would sure like to thank everybody today that was on. This has been a great session for me. Thank you, staff. I'll be happy to stick around for any questions that anybody might have further a few minutes after the broadcast. And thanks again very much. And feel free to sign off at this point, or if you want to stay on and ask questions, that would be great too. Thanks again, and have a great day and stay safe.